Good morning. We are up early. And this morning I got Mr. I think it's pronounced Theatris.
Good morning.
Morning, sir. How are you? I got your book in front of me. You're looking like John Shaft. I love it. Can you hear me? So while he is getting his audio tight, let me tell you a little bit about T. Williams, the Theatris. I love the name. I know that's a Mississippi name for sure. An accomplished Minnesota activist, valuable stories and insights on navigating crisis, building networks, and maintaining a commitment to community from the moment of the 1960s to the 2020 murder of George Floyd and beyond. So Mr. Williams has been there. He was there in North Minnesota when the national protest of the long, hot summer swept through his new hometown to along the Plymouth Avenue. He was there as part of the solution cobbled together to develop and begin to implement some Minneapolis-centered answers to some of the national discontent. Mr. Williams and his family moved to Minnesota in 1965, shaped by his Mississippi boyhood, his military service, and his master's degree in social work. Mr. Williams quickly became a leader in the Minneapolis Black community. Within months, he was named executive director of the Phyllis Wheatley Community Center. And after all the violence on Plymouth Avenue in 1967, he helped form the Minneapolis Urban Coalition, a remarkable collaboration among community, corporate, and political leaders to address issues of race and poverty. And if that's not enough, a year after the 1971 rebellion at Attica Prison, Minnesota's governor appointed him to the first corrections ombudsman in the country. In his first year, he created the office, mediated the release of a hostage at Stillwater Prison, and demonstrated the value and need for the program. In his stirring and instructive memoir, Mr. Williams reflects on his life now in the era of George Floyd, drawing on his long experience as a public servant, teacher, consultant, and school board member. Rewind, that's the name of the book. Rewind is his collaborative work, a capstone of a remarkable 50 years of activism. He wrote this book along with David Lawrence Grant, who has written drama for the stage, film, and television, as well as fiction and memoir. And he too lives in Minneapolis. So, can you hear us, Mr. Williams?
Yes, I can. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Good morning. Welcome.
Good
Up
morning.
early.
Yes, earlier than usual.
I listen. I know. So I'm grateful for your presence. All right. So what made you want to write a memoir? Because I love the description that it's a memoir, but it's an instruction. And I was reading it, and I felt like I was getting a master's lesson in organizing and community coalescing. Was that what you intended?
No, I didn't. Yes, that was more what I intended. I did not start out to write a memoir. I started out collecting a series of oral histories because of the work that I'd been involved with the Urban Coalition and the Ombudsman for Correction. Many of the people who helped establish those institutions were getting older, and several of them had passed on, and no one had truly recognized really what I call the true value of those institutions. And I refer to in my book and do really consider that the Urban Coalition was one of the more consequential institutions of its time that has not been recognized even here. Many of the people here in in Minneapolis and in Minnesota, particularly younger people, don't know anything about it. And I thought that there was too much history there to allow that to go untold, those stories. And in telling them, I thought it was important to say a little bit about myself, my background and experience and so on, and connect the dots there. And so that's what I started out, and I completed the first, the Minnesota Historical Society is published it, and they weren't sure that they wanted to publish it initially because it was seen as a memoir, and memoirs, unless you're super famous, don't sell. And I was not super famous, but the editor-in-chief over there recognized that the history of it, and that I was uniquely positioned to tell it. No one else was in that position, and it was a story that would go untold unless I told it. So they suggested that I get someone to work with me on it, because I was writing like an academic, and that wasn't going to sell.
Well, your publisher folks sent this over to me, and I enjoyed it. I especially love the cover because it's giving me 1960s, 70s John Shaft kind of vibe. So I loved it. I love that. What I was struck by, the time frame in which you are talking about, you span a great deal of social upheaval and unrest from the time you came from Mississippi as a child to I guess the George Floyd moment. I mean, that's an expansive amount of time, Mr. Williams. Talk to me about coming from Mississippi to Minneapolis. It must have felt foreign, or did it feel foreign?
Well, I did not come directly to Minneapolis from Mississippi. I went first to Portland, Maine, and experienced a tremendous culture shock there, because I went to high school out there for my junior year, and I was in a high school of 1,600 students, all but about a dozen were white. And every class I attended, I was the lone Black student there. And so when I left Portland, I went to Chicago, where the rest of my family lived. And I went to a high school with 3,500 students, all but one was Black. There was one Chinese student at Wendell Phillips High School where I attended. So I experienced a lot of culture shock moving from those places, and then went off to college and to the Army, and then was working into graduate school where I met my wife, and then came back to Chicago and was working, minding my own business, when I got a phone call from someone in Minneapolis, and I thought my wife was kidding me when I got home from work, and she said, "You have to call Operator 18 in Minneapolis." And I said, "I don't know anybody there." She said, "Call and find out." And I did, and it was the director of a settlement house there called Unity House, and I didn't know anything about it. I knew something about the settlement house movement. So she invited me out, and we went out for an interview, and my wife didn't like Chicago. She wanted to get out of Chicago. And when I got back, I told her, I think they will offer me the job. Should we take it? She said, "Yes, we're getting out of Chicago." So in 1965, we moved to Minneapolis in the dead of the winter. It was
my God,
3 degrees above zero, and that was as high as it got that day, and snow was on the ground. And so I was there for working at this settlement house, Unity House, for 8 months. Worked at the summer camp, and then when my wife and I and our 2-year-old came back from summer camp, and I got in, and the executive director at Phyllis Wheatley settlement had just resigned and took a similar job across the river in St. Paul. And I went on about minding my business until I got an invitation from a board member at Phyllis Wheatley, whom I didn't know, invited my wife and I to lunch at her home. And so I went, and when I arrived, there were 2 other women there. And so the board member that invited me was a Jewish woman, and with her there were 2 Black women. And when I went in and spoke and introduced myself, that was all the talking that I did for the next half an hour, because these women told me, all three of them, especially the black women, that we want you to become the next executive director at Phyllis Wheatley. And I said, what? And I said, well, I promised my employer that I would be with her at least 2 years. And they had already talked to my employer and said, she said that it was all right to do for them to interview me. And I said, oh my, these women are really something. And so we talked, and I still held to my guns about my commitment to my employer that I would not apply for another job. So what I did suggest to them, but if you send me a letter inviting me for an interview, I certainly will acknowledge it and come. And that was what I did. And I interviewed and I was given the job. And I hadn't run anything before in my life. I was just came there, I had the strong academic background, education, and everything, but I had supervised some students, some caseworkers at the county welfare department in Chicago. But I didn't know how to put together a budget, none of that stuff, but I took it and I learned. And I was young at the time and thought I could do anything. And I made a lot of mistakes. And the first one, I didn't know anything about what the relationship between a board of directors and the executive director should be. So I thought the executive director was the beat all, that they did everything. And so I wrote my first board meeting I came to, and only a handful of people showed up, wasn't even a forum. And I got angry, I was upset. And I went back in my office and I sat down and I wrote this letter. I didn't show it to anybody else. I certainly didn't show it to my wife, and she would have told me, don't send it. And I wrote them a letter reminding them of their responsibilities. This is the board of directors. And so I sent it out. And a few days later, this little woman, white woman, about 5 feet tall, weighing 98 pounds, soaking wet, came in with that letter and slapped it down on my desk and said, how dare you, young man, send something like that out. And then she read me out. And after she read me out, she told me that, look, we need you here, and we're going to help you get through. The women on the board helped me get through those first tumultuous years. And at the time, while I'm doing all of that, trying to learn how to run an organization, the people were rioting in the streets. And we had, and I got there in October 1966, and in October 1965, and in the summer of '66, we had a disturbance on Plymouth Avenue. Some young people broke some windows and started a couple of fires, and everybody got upset because that wasn't supposed to happen in Minneapolis. This is the liberal North. And so after that, that summer, people came out, they responded, they reacted, but not much took place. The kids were talking about, we want jobs, jobs, jobs. And people said, we're coming out, well, we'll get you jobs. And not much happened. Well, the next summer, 1967, that was the year all across the country that things were exploding. And so they exploded in Minneapolis. And this time it was a much bigger explosion. And people were much more upset. And just before that had happened, a whole group of folks had been invited along with people across the country by Lyndon Johnson, who was the president at the time, to a convocation in Washington to talk about what was happening across the country, was blowing up. As you may remember, you weren't there, you're not old enough, but at that time, the civil rights movement was going at its zenith, and they were protesting in Vietnam. So people were protesting everything and everywhere. And so the president invited the people there to talk about what to do. And at the same time, the federal government and Lyndon Johnson's Great Society program was in action. The war on poverty and resources were plentiful, much more so then than is the case now. So about 50 people went out from Minneapolis, good cross section of people from the corporate world and nonprofit and civic and government and so on. And they went out to Washington, and then they came back, and then I got a call from one of the top officials at the local newspaper. The family from the family who owned the newspaper wanted to come out and visit me and talk to me. And then, I was wondering, what this rich white man whom I knew by face but had never met, why does he want to talk to me? Well, he came out and found out he was a really great listener. He listened to me about, what I thought was going on. And then about week and a half, 2 weeks later, I got a phone call from a colleague who had worked in the settlement houses, but had just gone to the Board of Education. And he said that he told me about the meeting he had with the mayor and representatives from this group of corporate executives, and they wanted to engage him to do a study, a feasibility study, establishing an urban coalition. And he was smart enough to know that this didn't smell right, didn't look right. So he said to them, "What's it going to look like if a group of rich white men engage another white man to do a study in what ought to happen in the Black community?" He said, "Have zero credibility, and he would do it only if he get me to work with him on it." And I was new in town. I'd been in town for just 2 years. Most of the people, I hadn't been fully accepted by anybody there. And so I agreed to do it. And I laid out some conditions and said, I'm not going to go out there talking about doing a study. I said, these folks, they got to commit up front that they're going to do something, and they are engaging us as expert planners, helping to architects of this something that they're going to do, helping them define it. And that was what we did. We spent from August to December going across the community in every segment of the community and talking to people, and said, these folks, most of whom, particularly in the minority community, didn't believe us. Why would they want to do? They hadn't done anything before, he said. And so we convinced them, and we recommended the creation of this large gangly organization called the Urban Coalition that started out with 60 board members, and with corporate executives who had been used to running meetings with small boards of 10, 12, 15 max in closed boardrooms and nothing. And we said that these meetings have to be public. Your board meetings have to be public, open to the public. And they were scared to death of that. And then another condition we laid out is once you go into this, you do not have an option to step out. You've got to hang with it. So we were careful in our study of it and laying this out and engaging the people and convincing the people that they got to take a chance with it, because these are people that they had done a lot in the community, but mostly they were doing stuff with. They were making, they're working with museums and educational institutions and so on, and that's where their money. But they were committed to the community. That these were the old guard people who the families that started most of the business that were going on in General Mills, Pillsbury, Honeywell, were family started by families, and family members were still connected. The last generation of the family was still connected with those organizations. So they were committed to getting their community straightened out, because they thought they had a community that they didn't have in terms of race relations and the like. And so they were committed to doing something, but they really didn't know quite what it should look like. And we held these public board meetings that got very raucous, and several times it couldn't fully complete them because people would come in and take over the board meeting and with their own agenda. And you could see the president of the coalition sitting there turning multiple shades of red, because we insisted that the president of the organization had to come from those founding members, corporate members, and had to be a top leader in their organization. They had to either be the CEO, the top operating officer, or someone who reported directly to them. It could not be a personnel director or community.
So, Mr. Williams, how long did the Urban Coalition last?
Well, it lasted for 30 years, but not an effective 30. The first 10 years, and more specifically, the first 7 years were the most productive years of it. because they got things done during their time. Because what they did was they worked in work groups, smaller groups, and they didn't have, the public usually didn't get in the middle of that because the groups were small and they were held in people's offices and what have you, and they avoided the open meeting laws, and so they created. They did not provide direct services. What we did was we looked at the services that were being provided and those that could be improved and needed additional funding and support. They worked on that, and where nothing already existed for getting things done, they created them, like they created organizations to build a low income affordable housing.
So from the Urban Coalition, how did you get caught up in the ombudsman role?
Well, I was always minding my own business, and and what happened was that this was in 1972. In 1970 we had a new governor. November 70, we elected a new governor, very progressive governor, and he wanted to. He was highly ambitious, politically ambitious. He wanted to go places, so he wanted to do things, that would sort of, make a name for himself. And he brought in a commissioner of corrections from California who was seen to Minnesota. He was extremely radical and never did get comfortable here, but he did things that were a little unusual for Minnesota. And this was in 1971. There had been a riot at the Attica prison, and that's probably the largest prison rebellion that we've had in this country, and over 40 people died, and didn't want to see that happen in Minnesota. And in all of the studies that we looked at, that many times these riots occurred after mundane things. Someone was denied a visit. And his mail didn't get mail, was being held, was overly sensitive, and stuff like that. And they just got fed up with that. Well, of course, there was no one that they could complain to. They complained to the warden, and that didn't make a difference. And so they figured that they needed someone outside of that system that they could send their complaints to, that would then negotiate the resolution of those complaints and independently. And so that they had looked at the system in Scandinavia, the ombudsman system. That was where it existed, and so they thought it would create a prison ombudsman. And I was executive at Phyllis Wheatley, and it just sounded like a very interesting thing. And I thought that, well, I'll just send a letter of interest and say. Because they were creating a special commission to screen potential candidates for it, and I decided I would, I had no real expectation of getting it, but I wrote a letter. I was curious. I had also been active in the community and watching the top public officials when they made their appointments, who those people look like, and the governors coming on. And usually the only person of color that was in the administration was whoever was leading the civil rights department. And so I had written a letter to the governor, and I had even indicated that there needed to be more diversity in its administration. And so I got an invitation to be interviewed, and I went to the interview, and I interviewed, must have interviewed well enough to have been named to the position. Well, after I first got the job, the governor's top staff had some of their own ideas as to how I ought to be sort of instituted in it. That I had been told that there was a budget that was larger than what it actually turned out to be, and that it was really a temporary, it was a position supported on soft money, and whoever was coming in there would have to make a go of it and create the funding for it. And
did you enjoy it? I mean, what did you learn from it? Like, Because no one else has done this before. You've done
That
this.
that was the beauty of it, because nobody could come in and tell me how to do it, because they hadn't done it themselves. But I had studied it, and what I did was that I made sure that I started with the staff that was coming there to do the work, and the only staffing that I had was a deputy and a part-time secretary, and and I know that we weren't going to be able to get it with that. So I had to be resourceful and find out how can we get this thing funded, well, so I could get enough people there to do the job, and I wasn't going to get those funding from the state, from the government, because the legislature wasn't in session and wasn't going to be until January of '73, and this was in July of '72 that I took the job. So I used my connections. I had been awarded a Bush Foundation fellowship by the Bush Leaders Fellowship by the Bush Foundation, a very prestigious thing and highly competitive. And I'd gone down to Northwestern University to study on that fellowship for the summer, and came back. And so I had that connection, and I said, well, I've got to convince the Bush Foundation to fund this project. And that was really something that had never been done, private foundation funding state institutions, and which means that I had to convince the foundation that it was viable and that it was going to be in their best interest, and they would be looked upon highly if they decided to do so. So I got the funding that I needed so that I could hire the staff. And one of the things about the environment in prison, you will always have an opportunity to prove yourself or disprove it, succeed or fail, because there was always enough crisis for you to go in to intervene. And I never backed away from a crisis in my life, and I was young and I thought I could do anything, and I went into it, and first I had to fight the staff in the governor's office before my appointment became final, because when I went in for an interview with his top aides, they wanted me to appoint a black deputy, and I had someone that was working for me at Phyllis Wheatley that I wanted to take with me, because I knew him, I knew he could do the work, and I knew he would be loyal and he wouldn't be seeking my job.
So, Mr. Williams, because we're about to wrap up, and I want people to get this book.
Yes, I do too.
I want people to get this book because so many good stories are in this book about how you've done things, and I think it's really a blueprint on how to community build, coalition build, that kind of stuff. So, did you enjoy writing this? Was this
yeah?
Did it bring back good memories for you?
It did. I enjoyed collecting the data, and I had a lot of people that I talked to, and people who were interested and supportive of what I was doing, and I didn't I was surprised at the end that we came out with what we had, because when I started it was something I enjoyed, but it's extremely frustrating because I didn't seem to be getting anywhere. I wanted it done day before yesterday, and what I learned that this is a very tedious process, and that you have to redo stuff. When you're going sending stuff to a publisher, they'll send it back to you and tell you how to do it differently. And I engaged with David, which was strictly very, very helpful, because I had known his father. His father was one of the people that worked with that were brought in. If the corporations were bringing in people that could help deal with what was going on in the community. And David's dad came in, and he was very helpful. Got me an interview with the board of directors of the Cargill company there, where I spoke to them.
Your book comes out It's not out yet. It's coming out
No, it's in the market now. It's in the
on the
bookstores
market
all over.
now.
Yeah, yeah, it's all over the market. That I even talked to someone in Portland, the principal at the high school in Portland, Maine, about the book because I went to high school there and encouraging her to get it. I sent an email to the people at the New Haven Foundation because I did some work with them back in the late '90s and the early 2000s, and that. Encouraging them to get a hold of the book because I write about foundations in there as well, so and the role that they played in the community. So it's
All right. Well, I'm so glad I got the chance to talk to you
yeah,
and that you
well,
have a New Haven connection and that I have the book. And
mhm,
it is Activism and Social Justice and Memoir.
yes,
And I think this is such a great book for anybody to read. But if young people want to see where the roots come from,
yes.
this is such a wonderful book. Thank you for your time this morning, Mr.
Well, thank you for your interest, and I'm pleased that we were able to connect. Thank
I'm
you.
so glad. And I appreciate this book, and I will be talking about it for some time to come. So good
Please,
luck
please.
on the
Yeah,
book
thank you.
tours and all
Yeah,
the book conversations.
yes.
Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. Yeah. Okay. You have a good day.
You too.
Mhm.
Thank you, Harry. I will be back tomorrow, and thank you all for tuning in.